Okay, so what are we up to today? Well, if we are going to successfully get through our content, you should at the end be able to be broadly aware of 3 principles of universal design for learning and how they apply in our post-secondary school environment. Universal design for learning, a lot of people are aware of, perhaps for elementary and high school, and it's really great that the post-secondary school colleges and universities are now bringing universal design for learning into their course content, into their course development and everything else. We're going to focus mostly on representation, and that'll make a little more sense in a few minutes. But that's the first outcome that we hope. We're going to get to messing around with some Microsoft Office documents and seeing about how can we improve the accessibility on that, and Gina's going to lead that part. And then we're also going to journey along with Kevin while we revise course content using Blackboard Ally support. So that's our theme or our plan for the afternoon in outcomes. And so we're a small group. You can either annotate on this slide, and you can do that by coming down to your little toolbar and finding the annotation tool. But if you were to have a superpower, what would your superpower be? Would you have super strength, ability to read minds, ability to time shift? Would you want to be invisible? Would you like to fly? Or if you have another superpower you wish you had, you can also use annotation to add that. Why are we asking this question? Well, it's just nice to know that we're thinking, do we need to have superpower, or do we just need to have a way to, kind of use some tools that we have available? So I see there's a few invisibilities a bit, able to fly. I think the scary one for me would be, I think I'd like to read minds, but maybe that would be too much information. So why are we doing this? Well, because we do want to give you the sense that there is a way to have a superpower by using some of the accessibility checkers that are available in Microsoft Office, and then to use some of the other tools like Blackboard Ally to kind of give us some more power to use in our courses as we're developing and perhaps adapting. So if you're interested in actually having a micro badge from this particular session, what we're doing is we're going to be asking you at some point, so the micro badge application will be mailed out to you afterwards, but for our particular session, what we'd like you to do, and this will make sense as we get to the end, but I'm going to introduce it now so you're thinking about it. You're going to submit a completed activity from the workshop that you attended. That's the little preface for this part of the micro badge application. And for this particular workshop, what you're going to do in this particular workshop is you're going to either show us an Ally screenshot with the tools showing, not such a great, kind of low on the score in the reds up to perhaps a green, or a Microsoft, a document that you would use an accessibility checker, and you'll give us the pre version of that and then the post version of that. Right, so that's the plan for the workshop. Oh, I just have to turn this off so I can actually advance my slides. Perhaps that's, there we go. So I want to go back one. There we go. So I want you to look at this picture, and in the chat, I'd like you to tell me, what did you see first? So just pop it in the chat there. What did you see as I posted that image? So someone says they saw the heart. Someone says 2 cats. Anybody else? Cats, a dog. So, okay, there's an outlier here. I see most of you are seeing 2 cats, but somebody said a dog. That's really interesting, because when we give our students information, so we're moving towards this universal design for learning idea. When we give our students information, we think, I portrayed this information very clearly. I provided an image. They should be able to understand what I'm talking about because they can see the image, and maybe I'd even, well, hopefully I'd go on to describe it if I was doing some universal design for learning. But now some people are also saying I can see a dog. But isn't it interesting that our first reactions to that is often what our students will have when they hear something or they see something. And so what we're actually getting there is the fact that when people are given information, whether it's auditorily, whether it's visually, sometimes it's even the sense of touch. I sometimes do an activity where I ask people to do a motor skill, and these scans are actually from everyone doing the same motor skill, which is tapping their finger on the desk in front of them. That's really interesting, because what the brain scans show is that simple activity of tapping is actually interpreted by the brains in very different ways. And so it means that when we think that we've been clear by giving an image or giving some verbal instructions or given some written instructions, we think that everyone's processed that information exactly the same, but indeed they actually don't. So when we're talking about universal design for learning, we're talking about how can we take our courses and make them more accessible, but we're also talking about universal design for learning, which means we're trying to make it more accessible for all learners. Someone recently in a workshop that I was at said, it's not just about accessibility, it's about access, which gets to this kind of image of, we're talking about equality. So equality would be, we would give everyone the same. Everyone reads the same document. But we can see that there might be a problem for that for some of our learners. They're not going to be able to actually see that document or read that document. So what we might do is we might then make it more equal. So we might provide it in some different formats in that. But oh, that's nice. I have a little thing on my screen that says, would you like to restart your computer right now? No, thank you. So the second panel gets to the fact that now we have the three boys, and with some equity involved, we've given some boxes for the two that weren't able to see over the fence quite as easily. So now they actually can all see over the fence, but the actual load of physical demand, one might think if we actually focus in on the middle child, he might actually be putting more effort into actually peeking over that barrier that's there. And so we want to actually make the physical effort equal as well. So it's not quite so hard for everyone. We talked about cognitive load and what is it like as a student to be able to process this information? How can we make it easier for students to process the information? If we actually move to the third slide, you can see that the barrier has been removed. So ideally what we want to do with our courses is we don't want to have a barrier to begin with. We want to design our courses from the beginning thinking, am I putting anything in my course that I actually should ramp? So I want to make sure that everyone has access. I want to make sure everyone can get the information into their brains. If, however, I happen to have a barrier, then we can get rid of it. We want to get rid of it. And in fact, I like Gina's comment on this. She says that when we actually do the last one, which is we're liberating our students, we're helping them gain access equally, what we actually do is we then allow them to actually get on the field and play. And so it's now no longer just the sort of watching from the sideline, but we're actually now enabling them to be active learners in their course content. And that's really what we want for all our students. So when you're thinking about when you're developing activities, when you're developing modules in your course, what you want to do is you want to think, you know, first of all, I want to see how many ramps can I not need to go back and build in my building. I want to start from what am I trying to get out to my students? What's the information I need to get out to my students? Am I being very thorough in how I'm explaining that? It might be visually, it might be auditorily, and it might be in some other ways. So universal design for learning actually looks at the three principles are representation. So how am I going to get that information out? So I had a picture at the beginning. I put the picture out, but the perception of each of you might have been different. By adding some other language and symbols and text and stuff like that, I might have made that clearer because I would have honed in on what I wanted you to see. So I could have actually labeled it saying it's cats with the hearts, right? And then that's actually going to build into comprehension. So then we're going to be going forward on a more equal plane. So we've got perception, language, and symbols and that sort of thing. And so as we walk through how can we make more accessible documents, then we'll be able to see how we can kind of build that accessibility in from the beginning. The action and expression, if we go back to that image again, and the three boys peeking over or looking over the barrier, that physical action and that expression and skills and fluency. It's not that some of the boys couldn't do the seeing, it was that they needed to have a different way of being able to do it. And so we want to, that cognitive load idea, how can we actually reduce the demand on the cognitive load to actually see or hear things or actually process what's the teacher teaching me so they can move on to actually telling you what they've learned and know. And that also gets into executive functions and how we can support students with the whole process of moving on to demonstrating competency. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we're going to focus mostly on representation this afternoon, but I wanted to just touch base with the other two because they are very um, important for us to consider as we're looking at universal design for learning. And the last one, that engagement, and we were just listening to the keynote speaker and look at what all the things that she was doing to engage and recruiting interest and all of those things, even the self-regulation, if you get into some of the things that she was probably doing in that liquid syllabus, and we talk about how do we help our and support our students for time management and things like that. So universal design for learning is a really interesting package, which I think can help us kind of look at what we're going to do, which is we're going to look at some features of how do we increase accessibility in documents. But while we're doing that, we also want to think we're not just increasing the accessibility because we have someone who's low vision or blind or has physical disability that affects their ability to quickly type answers or whatever that is, but we want to actually make that accessibility easier for everyone. All right, so I'm going to pass it over to Gina, and she's going to now start to lead us into, so how do we take some of the documents that we do have and how do we make them more accessible?
Okay, thank you. So as Sherri said, I'm going to be talking about creating accessible documents. So my part of this presentation is going to start with a demonstration. Then I'm going to have you broken out into breakout groups and have you actually look at a beautifully inaccessible document and talk about that. And then we'll come back together and do a debrief about your discussions in the breakout room. Sherri, can you flip to the next slide, please? Oh, okay, I will share. So I'm going to be talking about PowerPoint specifically today. And the first thing I'm going to show you is the Microsoft Accessibility Checker. So although I'll be showing it to you in PowerPoint, the Accessibility Checker can be accessed in all Microsoft products or in PowerPoint, Word, and Excel at the very least. And you would access that accessibility checker in all three of those softwares in the exact same way that I'm going to demonstrate today. And then I'm going to talk about two specific accessibility fixes that we can do in a PowerPoint document. The first one called alt text on images, and then the second one called reading order. Okay, so here I have a PowerPoint document. And so the first thing I'm going to show you is how to access the accessibility checker in this software. So if you're using a PC or a Mac, it is slightly different. So right now I am coming to you, I'm presenting from my Mac computer, and then which I will demonstrate first on my Mac, and then I will switch over to a PC and show you how to do it on the PC. So if you're using a Mac, Microsoft has made it very simple for you to do an accessibility check. So you go to the Review tab up here at the top, and then there is an icon here for Check Accessibility. And I click on that, and when I do that, a pane opens up on my right, showing me different accessibility issues. Now, there are 3 different types of accessibility issues that you can find. I had another one, but I corrected it in the last session. So I must have saved it after I corrected it. So anyway, I will put that error back in before I show it to you again. But there are 3 different types that you can get. You can get errors, you can get what's called a warning, and then the third type is called a tip. So errors are things that you absolutely need to fix in your document. Warnings are things that are a very good idea to fix, and tips often are Microsoft saying, I'm not sure if there's an issue here, but there might be an issue here. So you have a look. Or it could be that, or it could be sort of a low grade accessibility issue. Okay. I would suggest fixing all of the issues, but that is sort of in the priority of inaccessibility, that, to tackle the problem. So errors are the most, most inaccessible. Warnings would come next, and then tips would be after that. Okay, so I'm going to switch over to my PC for a second and show you how to find the accessibility checker from there. Okay, share my PC. Okay, so this is my PC laptop. So if you are using Microsoft version 2016 or earlier, so 2016 or earlier, unfortunately, it's a little bit cumbersome to find the accessibility checker. But so the way you would do that is you go to File, then you go to Info, then you go to Check for Issues, and then you go to Check Accessibility. Okay, and after you do that, that pane opens up on the right side, just like in my other demonstration on the Mac. So I'll do that one more time. You go to File, go to Info, you go to Check for Issues, and then Check Accessibility. Okay. If you're using Microsoft 2019 or 365 on a PC, that option still exists. And they have also simplified it to be the same process as a Mac. So if you go to Review and then Check for Accessibility. Okay, so you have two ways that you can access it from a PC if you're using a more current software. Okay, so let me stop sharing here. And let me go back here. Okay, so one of the wonderful things, there's many wonderful things about the accessibility checker. If I open up the chevrons here, it'll show me what the accessibility issues are in my document. And if I click on these different pieces, it will jump to the slides where those issues exist. Okay, and as I clear those issues, these items will disappear in the accessibility inspection results. Okay, so that's how I access the accessibility checker. The next thing I want to talk about is images. So the WCAG guidelines, and if you've never heard of what WCAG guidelines are, they are an international set of web content accessibility guidelines. And the AODA, the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, which is our legislation in Ontario, uses the WCAG guidelines to determine how to make content accessible. Okay, so one of the guidelines states that non-text content requires a text alternative. Okay, so examples of non-text content would be images, would be infographics, would be graphs, charts, anything like that. We can provide this text alternative in two different ways. The first way is what's called alternative text, or alt text for short. And the second way is called a long description. Okay. A long description would be provided for what we call complex images. So again, that would be an infographic or a pie chart or a graph of some sort. So the reason we provide alternative text is if a person is a person who is blind uses a software called screen reader software to have documents read to them. So when this particular software comes up against an image, it will read out the text that you provide for that image as alternative text to the screen reader user. Okay. So what do
I'm going to jump in
we,
on a pause there and just mention that as Gina's explaining this, think back to those images that I showed you at the beginning, and the fact that, yes, a screen reader is going to read out what the information is that she's going to show us how to do. But if someone was just kind of scratching their head and going, why is that image there? What's the teacher trying to portray with this image? The alt text would also pop up and would provide some of that clarity, like an ambiguous picture that I put up, or what we think is a very clear picture, but our students may be still struggling a little bit with what is this actually showing.
And yes, that's a very good point, Sherri. And as we know, universal design, if we implement universal design for learning in our content and in our instruction, and accessibility, which I consider to be part of under the umbrella of universal design for learning, accessible content doesn't just help those with disabilities, but it also helps other people, right? So, making our content and our documents accessible is going to help all our students. I'm going to skip this slide for a sec. So I'm going to show you how to do it first. So how do we add alternative text to our images? So this slide right here, this is this issue here, picture 3, slide, no, that's not it, picture 6, picture 3. Oh, I did it on that one already. All right, so let's go back. I think I saved the document after the last session, so it fixed some of the stuff. Anyway, so this image right here is showing that it does not have alternative text. So the way that I add the alternative text, if I am using Microsoft 2019 or 365, they've simplified the process. I right-click on the image. I go down to Edit Alt Text. This pane opens up on the right, and there's this empty box, and that's where I'm going to type in my alt text. And after I do that, you will see that that accessibility issue has now disappeared from my accessibility report, my inspection report. Okay, I'm going to do that one more time. So I right-click, go to Edit Alt Text, and then I put in my alternative text here. If you are using Microsoft 2016, so the older version of the software, it's a little bit more cumbersome. You right-click, you go down to Format Picture. The third icon in from the top here is Size and Properties. I click on that, and then there will be an option here where you can put in your alt text. Because I'm using 365 on my computer, I don't see that option. But if you're using 2016, that option will be there. So I'll do it one more time. Right click, go down to Format Picture. Third icon in is Size and Properties. And then your option to edit, to enter your alt text will be right here. So there's a few rules, or let's say suggestions, that we want to consider when we're creating and writing our alt text. The first is that we want to convey context and function. Okay, what is important about this? We want to be succinct. And the reason we want to be succinct is a screen reader will stop reading after approximately 25 words or 125 characters. So we want our text description to be short. And hence why, if we have something that's complex, why we need to provide that long description. We do not want to be redundant. So we don't necessarily want to repeat the exact same thing that's in the content surrounding it. Context matters. And for this one, I always stress this one, especially in educational institutional settings. You as the content expert or the subject matter expert providing this image understands what's important about this image. And so there are multitudes of ways we can describe the same image, but context matters depending on what you think is important about this image for your students to know. And then the last point, we do not want to use phrases like image of or graphic of to describe the image. And the reasoning for that is the screen reader software is able to identify the object as an image and announce it as such. So it will say image cup of tea. If I write image of cup of tea, then it will say image of cup of tea. Okay, so we don't want to actually put those words in our description. The only time I make an exception for this is if it's important for the learner to understand the medium of the image. So for example, in art classes or things like that, where I'm trying to make a distinction between a photograph and a painting and a drawing, for example. So then I might say photo of something like that, okay? Okay, and then the last thing I'm going to show you, and unfortunately, let me stop sharing for a second, and I'm going to put the error back in before I show you how to fix it. Give me 1 second.
Joys of doing a session twice.
Yeah.
You did so well the first time that everything's perfect now.
And normally I don't save the documents, but for some reason I did. So
that's right.
That's okay.
We're with you.
Okay, so did it. Let me share again. Okay, so the last thing I want to show you is something called reading order. Okay, so as a sighted user, as someone who's looking at this document, I have an intuitive sense or an unconscious sense about how I'm supposed to look at this document or what order I'm supposed to look at this document. So I'm going to read the title first. Then I would say the content is probably important, then the image, and then the, you know, it's terrible to say this, but let's say the, in quotations and air quotes, the least important item on this slide would be the citation of the image, okay? So the screen reader software wants to give this same experience to a person who is blind or a person who has low vision that's using the software. However, we need to define the order that this slide will be read in. So we have the ability to see the order that this slide will be read in two ways, okay? The first way is I go to my home tab, and then I go to this icon over here, which is arrange. I click on that and I go down to selection pane. And what that does is it opens up a box on my right that shows me all the content on my slide. The second way that I can look at the reading order of the content on my slide is by what I call, or I think is called officially, but I call it the tab test. So the way that I do the tab test is I click into my slide, not on any piece of content, but just generally into my slide. And I use the tab key on my keyboard. And I will hit the tab key. And as I hit the tab key, you will see that different pieces of my content get highlighted. Okay, so what this is telling me is that first the title will be read, then the citation will be read, then the text box will be read, and then the image is read last. You will also notice as I cycle through using the tab key and you look at the selection pane on the right, different pieces of content are highlighted as I cycle through, okay? The significant thing to note is that the screen reader will read from bottom to top, not top to bottom. So it first reads title 1, it then reads text box 5, which is the citation. It then reads content placeholder 2, which is the text box with the content. And then it reads picture 6. So that's important to note, bottom to top. So currently I'm not happy with this order, right? I would like it to read the title first, then this content on the left, this written content, then the image and the citation last, but it's not currently doing that. Okay, so the way that I can fix this is I can find this piece of content in my selection pane, which is text box 5. I left click and hold with my mouse, and then I can move and drag it into the order that I want it to be read. Okay, so I've done that, and now you'll see that it's actually reading it in the correct order: title, text, image, citation. So I'll do it one more time. So it's in the wrong order. I take that piece of content, click, hold, and drag it to where I would like it to be read. Remembering bottom to top. So title, text, image, citation. All right, and that's it for the demonstration part of my presentation. So now we're going to put you into breakout groups. And while you're in the breakout groups, I would like you to look at the document I provided called activity/PP, I believe it's called, and consider these 3 questions. So I want you to identify the inaccessible content in the document. Think about what the accessibility checker found. What did the accessibility checker find that I didn't demonstrate? And what did you feel was inaccessible that the accessibility checker did not find? So what did it find? What did it not find? Okay. So Kevin, how did you
Okay, so is everyone ready? We're going to put you into, thank you, Gina. We're going to put you into breakout rooms. I'll start those in a second. I'll just let you know that in room 1 with Gina, so I'll do it right this time, Gina. Gina's in room 1 with Ash, Barb, Paula, and Yvonne. And then room 2, Sherri's going to be with Drew, Emily, Miguel, Monica, and Susan. And then I'll be in room 3 with Aaron, Janet, Catherine, Lauren, and Trisha. And I'm going to start those rooms now, and I'll give you, there'll be a 1-minute warning after, we'll give you 15 minutes, a 1-minute warning to get back into the main room. So have fun, and we'll see you on the other side.
All right.
Over back to Gina. Go ahead, Gina.
All right, great. So as the group, I just want to talk about what you found to be the issues in the document. So here we have the document. So let's just go through and have a look. So if I'm going to do the accessibility check, we will see that there are a number of different types of errors, warnings, and tips that come up for this document. So maybe I'll go group by group. So group 1, can you identify anything that's wrong with this slide here?
Feel free to unmute yourselves if you like. And
oh yeah, sir. I forgot to say that. Or if anyone else, we don't have to go group by group. If anyone would like to chime in and give you know, an answer to what they feel is wrong with this slide.
Color, font, contrast. Yeah.
So the colors, the color contrast, the contrast for the title. Yeah. And the font. So what do you mean by the font?
It's not easy to read. It needs to be a sans serif font.
Yes. Yeah. So it needs to be a what we call sans serif fonts. And Arial would be an example of that.
And there's an empty text box.
Yes. So there's an empty text box right here, right? So a good rule of thumb, even though not strictly, it's not a guideline, but from the perspective of, you know, making content simple for our students, this might be confusing to someone to have this empty text box here. So I would probably remove it, right? Remove any elements you're not using on the slide. Yeah, and Sherri posted the CNIB, so the Canadian National Institute for the Blind, print guidelines suggest that we use sans serif fonts. Okay, this slide here. What's going on here?
I detect a need for coffee. We're all very
It's a long
chitter-chattery in the
day.
group, but now they're just all tired.
Yeah, it's a long day. It's a
Too
long
much
day.
text. Again, the font and the title isn't as readable as it could be.
Yeah, way too much text, right? So less is more is a good principle to use when we're talking about accessibility. And that would be a similar issue here.
Along with the title repeated?
Yes. Yeah. So we'll see that here in our accessibility checker, it's identifying this slide as having a duplicate title. Okay, so that's actually an accessibility issue. So each of our slides titles need to be unique.
You know, I was mentioning that when we're doing this sort of labeling of content, it can help, again, as of folks who are using screen reading software, but it can also help folks who are maybe going through your 67 or 80 slides to look specifically for content. And if you've labeled 7 slides, Principles of Good Practice in Education, it's maybe got it down from the 67, but they still have to go through all 7 of these to actually find the piece that they're looking for. So again, the labeling of content and information benefits all learners, not just the folks who are using screen reading software.
Yeah, and that's actually a UDL principle around providing labels. I forget which one, but
no test.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to tell you which one either right now.
I want to say 8 point something, but I'm not sure. Yeah, and even like, you know, even when we're talking to our students about our content, right? If you're saying on the slide, Principles of Good Practice in Education, then, you know, they could say which one. There's 7 of them, right? So if you say, you know, 7 Principles of Good Practice in Education, slide 2, number 2, that will also make it easier for communication with your students. I noticed there's a couple questions in the chat. The red may not be contrasting enough. Yeah, absolutely. Probably not. There is a good accessibility contrast checker put out by the Pacello group. I'll put the link in the chat afterwards, but it's fantastic for checking that. And then there's another question: how does APA work with AODA? Oh, the bane of my existence, APA.
Sorry. I noticed it on the previous slide, Gina.
Yeah.
The reference to the textbook or the article or whatever it is that's in there. Sorry, I wasn't reading the content of the slides. Of course, is underlined and italicized, or one of them. So, which would be following proper APA that we always encourage our students to be using.
Yeah.
But how does that work in these, and in the same in some other places where you are, you know, you need to underline something or as you're referencing.
Yep. So a great thing is the APA recently did an update. I want to say within the last 6 months, but my perception of time has been, it might even be a year, might even be a year ago now. They've done an update. So some of their practices are more accessible, which is fantastic. So in edition 7 of the APA, students are no longer required to use Times New Roman for their assignments. You can use Arial if you like. They listed 3 or 4 different fonts. I can't remember them all, but I remember Arial was in there. So that's fantastic. With regards to italices, so in this particular case, we have an italic here. Accessibility principles suggest that we use italics sparingly, and that we do not underline unless it's a hyperlink. Okay, so underlines are still problematic. I can't remember right now which formatting structure uses underline in APA. I do know that there's a formatting structure that uses italic. That would not be so bad as long as it's minimally, like not a paragraph of text italicized. And I think that's changed in the APA too. Now when we do quotes of chunks of, you know, where you indent the quote. I recall in the past you'd have to italicize it as well, but I don't see that anymore. It's now just regular, like regular text. With regards to citations still have some issues. And that has a lot to do around, I'll jump to the last slide for a second. It has a lot to do with this, where when you're providing a hyperlink in your citation, you provide the entire URL in your citation, right, where you retrieved it from. This is problematic because so I'm giving you the answer on this slide, one of the answers. Hyperlinks from an accessibility perspective need to have meaningful text on the hyperlink. So providing a URL like this is not accessible. So I make a small change in documents that let me try and find one. Hold on. Let me show you what I do to hyperlinks, or rather what I do to, sorry, I'm going to stop sharing for a sec so I can find it. What I do to my APA citations, just to make them a little bit more accessible. So I guess some things are good, some things are not good. And so it's this sort of juggling act of trying to be compliant in both arenas, right? And sometimes, I'm doing my master's right now, for example, but sometimes I have to do things that I don't like doing because they're not accessible, right? Okay, let me see if I can find so when I provide my citations, I change them a little bit. Here's a good example. And it doesn't go against APA, what I do. So, so here, for example, you'll see I have some citations. So what I do is, instead of putting the URL, if you can look at this last one here, instead of putting the URL on the instead of putting the hyperlink on the URL, I put the hyperlink on the meaningful text in that citation, and I remove it from the URL. So that makes it a little bit more accessible.
Thanks, Gina.
You're welcome. So let's say it's halfway there. Let's say that. But you still include the URL. Yes. So there is a question. I have a question about scanned texts. I teach a little bit.
Yeah, they were asking about, is it okay for me to scan and then upload an excerpt as a PDF? And I had just written back, and then I was going to throw it over to you, saying make sure that it's OCR, not a image of the text. Might be a little bit beyond the extent of the workshop, but I'm sure Kevin and I will madly go off and find you a link to some support on how to do that properly while Gina continues. So thank you for the great questions, guys.
Yeah, and that's a
Kevin and I busy
whole
in the background.
That's a whole
other workshop.
Other 2-hour workshop I do.
Yeah, but I'll see what I can find, or if Gina has one that she could perhaps provide while Kevin's doing his. If you've got something at the ready there, Gina. Okay.
Okay, and and I think we'll leave it at that. I just want to. The last thing I do want to point out is that this slide is missing a title, and that is also flagged as an error. So all of our slides need to have titles, and our slide titles also need to be unique. Okay. And that's it.
All right.
Thanks, Gina. And thank you for everybody for participating and contributing to that about our documents. What I'm going to talk about now is the next stage. And I think we should always start by with our documents to make sure that they're accessible. And then there's another layer that we can introduce to when we put them into our learning management system. And we at Humber and at Seneca, we're using Blackboard. What I'm going to talk about now, which is Blackboard Ally, and I'll just ask Sherri if she wouldn't mind just sharing that presentation again, so we can just go over a couple of points related to Ally. I'm not sure if some of your institutions, Tricia, what do you use for your learning management system?
We currently use Blackboard. We have Ally, but we've not enabled it because we were having a lot of trouble. And we are also now just embarking on an LMS review. So
Okay.
Who knows?
Oh, fun times. So some of you might not have Ally, but just to let you know, even if you don't have Blackboard, Ally is a tool that you can actually purchase for any learning management system. It'll go into Canvas, it'll go into Moodle, it'll go into Desire to Learn, all those kinds of things. So it might, and more of these types of tools are coming for learning management systems. Another one you might have heard is called Brickfield. It's a similar tool, but so the way they work is similar, and they're evolving tools. So they're always increasing the level of features that they have, etc. But I'll just go over and give you kind of, for those specifically at Humber and Seneca, what we have available currently and how you can use the tool to improve accessibility. So I'm going to go and open up my screen. I'll just, you know what, I'll just go right in and share the screen just for the sake of time, and we'll just go and see what's involved. And so I'm just gonna, you let me know when you can see my screen. I'm just gonna move that out of the way, get rid of that one. And let me know if you can see my screen okay. Is it good?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna go into a course that we have here at Blackboard. This is our training course that I use for at Seneca. And so it's a typical course. And I'm going to start from the student perspective. What will Ally do for us from a student's perspective? So let me just go into the course as a student. Okay, so here I've got a typical opening up in the announcements area, welcome message. And let's say I'm going to the course information. Okay, and then at Seneca, part of our requirements is we have to post the course outline, the official course outline, and we have to provide an addendum and weekly schedule. You'll notice in the addendum and weekly schedule that there's this icon, an A with an arrow pointing down, which means to download alternative formats. So as a student, if I wanted to look at the alternative formats available here, I could click on this particular icon. Okay, and what we're talking about for alternative formats here is for the actual text box of which this item has been added. I click on here to see what are the options. I could download as an EPUB, I could download as electronic braille, I could get as an audio file, and I can get as something called Beeline Reader, which is actually quite interesting. And let me download that just to show you what Beeline Reader is all about. It'll just be a second whilst it establishes a connection. My computer is so slow these days. Okay, it's the old circle going around and around and around. Hopefully it'll download shortly. Okay, and then I've got this, it's going to download it as an HTML file. I'll just save that. And in a second, it's going to open it up as in the Beeline reading format. And then I'm going to get Sherri to explain what that means. So here we go. It's coming up. I'll just have it open it up. And it'll take a couple of seconds to get there. Here it comes. There we go.
So one's coming, yeah, very short document compared to the one I usually do. But what it does is it provides, so lots of research has gone into what engages the brains of students. And one of the folks, or one of the groups that we often look at for needing that extra support can be students with attention deficit disorder. And so the research actually says the more modalities we can engage them in, so by reading with their eyes, listening with their ears at the same time, on-task behavior improves, lots of things actually, they actually comprehend more. So what this particular tool does is it's a little bit more of that kind of teasing the brain a little bit to be more engaged in the content. So instead of it just being black text on a white background, you can see as Kevin's kind of circling through the different things, it actually is changing the color of the text. So the first line starts black, goes to blue. The next line also helps with the eye tracking. The next line starts with blue and then goes to black and then black to red. And that continues all through the document. So for some students who need that extra kind of engaging, kind of teasing on their brain to help them actually stay focused, they can use this. They can continue to use some of the other software that you heard me allude to there a little bit, which is they can also be reading with their ears as well and listening, but their eyes would be following with this kind of change of font, or sorry, change of font color as they're proceeding through the document. And that's what the research is actually showing, is that it helps with reading, staying on task, comprehension, all of those sorts of things.
Great. So that's in for this particular one, we've got some alternative formats. Then I've also got a couple of documents. I've got the addendum here that's in a PDF format or a doc format. So I could then look at these and click on that, and I could see what options are available for that document. So I could get it as an HTML version, EPUB, electronic braille, audio version, or the Beeline reader version. And as a student, I can download. And there is interesting, there's terms of use for this. It talks about who can download this document in an alternative format and what is true. So, you know, you can use it if you own the copyright, if you have permission, if you have a disability that permits the creation of accessible versions of materials, etc. So they do have that kind of qualifier in there for these types of alternative formats. I'm just going to close
other
that
nice
there.
thing that it does is that again provides that alternative format. So one of the comments we often hear from students is, "Oh my gosh, it's so much reading." So if the option to be able to download an audio file to maybe perhaps listen to a story or listen to an article that's online, something like, or sorry, not online, but an article that you posted onto Blackboard, if that option is there, that can really help our students maybe step away from their computers where they need to be sitting reading something online that's posted up to your Blackboard site. So again, Universal Design for Learning, multiple means of representation is being very nicely supported by Ally.
Great. And so now that's the student perspective to get the alternative formats. I'm going to exit student perspective, and now let's look at it from a faculty perspective and notice some other options that are there. So let me go back to the course information section. And this time you will notice that with the faculty view, I'm provided with a couple of extra icons here, which gives me an accessibility score for any content that I've added in here. You'll notice that my PDF document here is actually got a good score, a really good score. It's green. It's all the way, the arrows all the way over to the green side. These are the gauges that Ally uses. It usually uses red, orange, and green, similar to a stop sign, but with green being good, orange being not so, it's getting there, but it's not quite there yet. Some work to be done, and red meaning that you got some work to do to fix the accessibility. So this document is good, but my Word document here, you'll notice, is showing up as not quite there yet. So I need to fix that. So what do? So I click on that gauge, and then Ally will open up and give me some options. It gives me a score. You'll notice it's 48% score. It might look like it's a fine document as far as accessibility is concerned, but there's some issues here. And it's noticed some things like this document does not have headings. And for those of you that write documents, the use of the heading tool really makes it readability better. Plus, it's also an accessibility must for folks that are using screen readers or other formats for that document. So what does Ally do? It gives a what this means, similar to like the Microsoft checker, where it says, why do we need to do this? This is, what does this mean? And I could read up on, you know, what does a heading mean, and etc. for that. Okay. And then how to add headings. So it goes over and gives me some instructions about how would you do this in a specific document that you're using. Okay. So let's pretend I was able to go back and fix the heading issue here using my Word tool, and now I'm ready to upload it again. This is another example of, it's a good practice to use your accessibility checker in Word first, then upload your documents, and then have Ally have a second look at the documents rather than the other way around, because it'll save you some fixing and uploading time. So let me go and browse my computer. Let's say I went off and I fixed that, made sure it was all okay. I got to go find it now. Where did I put it? Okay, here we go. And I think it's this document. That was a not accessible document. So now I'm going to go find the one that is accessible that I fixed up. I'm going to open it up. And let's see what happens. It's uploading the file. And now my score jumps up to the perfect. Yay, I fixed it. It looks the same to us as citing individuals. But from an accessibility point of view, headings have been added. I'm sure there's some other stuff I had to do in there about row headings and things like that. But now this document is good to go. So then I can say, great, I fixed that issue, and you'll see that my gauges now are all into the green area, which is awesome. Now, there's some other things that you can do as faculty, which are really handy. One of them, if you've come down into your content system if you have that available to you for your particular course, I'm going to click on that content system, and you'll notice that as the files are uploaded into your course, there is a column for accessibility, and it will give you gauges for the types of documents that are there if they are accessible. You'll notice I'm doing really well until I get down to the stop sign icon, which is a red, okay, which is a really low score. Again, I could click that icon and it will tell me, oh, it's only at 25%, and it tells me the problem. I'm missing a description. Okay, so I go, well, what does this mean and how do I fix it? Okay, I can read those. And in this case, it actually gives me a box where I could type the alternative text directly here and add it. Okay, so what would be some good alternative text for this particular icon that I've got here, which is the stop icon? Who wants to chime in and tell me, what should I write here? Any ideas? Don't be shy.
Stop sign?
Okay, sure. Would that be enough? And I'll defer to my Sherri and Gina for that. Would it be enough to just to say stop sign?
I'll comment. So if we think back to what the accessibility suggestions and guide, or what the suggestions are for writing alt text, one of them is content and function, right? So depending on what you're using this for, could change the alt text. So if you're using it as an icon, then you might say stop sign icon or something like that, or module stop icon, or to describe it. But if you're using it as an image of a stop sign, then it might be okay to say stop sign.
Someone in the chat has mentioned that perhaps you could say stop sign to suggest you pause and read the comment.
Okay, sure. Okay, I was going to say red hexagon with the word stop in the center, representing a pause, something like that. Would that be okay? Or should I go with what Sherri suggested there? What do you think? Or is that too long to put all that in there?
Yeah, actually, it wasn't my suggestion. It was someone else's suggestion, but it was a good one. Again, it depends on what the image is actually trying to portray, which is, I think we're all kind of, it's interesting now, we're almost getting frozen in place with our, oh my gosh, am I going to do it quotes right? Again, what you want to do is, just see if you can make those forward movements. I'll talk about Thomas Tobin near the end of the session, but I think what we're trying to do is now we're all stopping and thinking, well, why do I have this image? What's the purpose of the image? What's the message that the image is going to be relaying to my students? And then for someone who's low vision or blind, how do I get that same information to my student who's low vision or blind with saying something like, a stop sign, recognize stop sign in Canada saying stop, and then we start going, my gosh, what do I say? Is the shape important? Is the color important? Is the word important? What is the important information? So don't get frozen in place, just give it a try. And as the more we practice doing this, we'll hear Gina's voice in our background, and we can check our things on what makes good alternative text. And then as we get a little more comfortable in doing it, then we probably won't be quite so, oh my gosh, what if I say something, quote, wrong? An alt tag of some sort is certainly a wonderful step in the right direction.
Yeah, so I'll just put it like so, and I'll add that, and let's see how that, it jumps it right up. Ally says, okay, you are now good. That was all that was missing from that, was some alternative text. It does, again, it's not going to fix this on its own. It's not going to give you an indication perhaps on how good the alt text is, although it does do, if you don't put enough in there, it does give you a little bit of a hint to say, did you describe it properly, that sort of thing. So I'm going to close that just so that now I've bumped up that stop sign icon. I've still got this issue down here with another piece of content in there, but I'm going to show you another way that you can fix it. So far we've gone directly into the content. Let me just repeat what we've done so far. I can go directly into a content area. I can go directly to the indicators and review and fix that way. I can come down to the content system into my course, look at the accessibility column, find the indicators and fix that way. And there's also a really handy tool down in the control panel, and it's found under Course Tools right here. And if you click on it, it's something called the Accessibility Report. Before I click on it, I just want to let you know, sometimes, depending if you haven't enabled this yet, some courses might not have this listed in the tools area. To fix that, come down to customization, tool availability, and then you'll see that the accessibility report at the very top, just make sure it's selected, and then you click submit. Now, depending on your institution may or may not have enabled accessibility reporting. So you might want to check there, and just to make sure, if you've got Ally, for one, whether or not that's been enabled. So let's go ahead and try it. So I'll come back, and now I know that accessibility reporting is available in my course tools. So just once again, I'll come down to my course, I'll scroll down to Course Tools, I'll click on that option to expand it, and I'll click Accessibility Report, and then I'll click the launch button for it to go off and do its reporting. And let's see what happens. Okay, here's my course. It's 96% of the way there. That's pretty good, but it's not perfect, okay? And now, so there is an issue here about what is good enough for our students, right? We want to get to 100% if possible, but there may not be times when we can. A good example is for one of the courses I teach, I have them access an open textbook, which is a PDF document. The issue with that is that the document is not completely accessible. Matter of fact, it's pretty low in terms of accessibility. And I can only ever get it up to about 43% on what I can control with that document. So I have to provide alternatives in that case for that document, for folks that might not be able to access all that material. So I'm trying to get to the 100%, but it might not be at this moment in time until I contact the publisher, say, can you make an accessible version? I have to start to look for alternatives for that. But here in this case, I'm 96% of the way there, and it shows me all the course content that it can find. Okay, again, these tools are not perfect. Okay, and then it's got things like content with the easiest things to fix. There's one item, and content with a low scoring piece. So we can decide, where do we want to start? A lot of folks like to fix the easiest stuff first, or a lot of folks want to go and find the really, really inaccessible things and fix those first. It's up to you. All I have to do is click the start button. I'm going to go, I see this red indicator. My mind goes, I got to fix that. So I'm going to go and start that button here. And then it'll show me there's that welcome image, and it's really low. It's only at 3%. So I gotta do something about that. So let me go in and click the indicator to fix this. And you might have remembered this was indicated when I looked at the course content system as well. So it tells me I got 3%. It says the image is missing a description. Okay, so let me put one in. It tells me here what the issue is. Okay, so I don't have an alt text, so I can say the word welcome written in multiple languages. Like so. Okay, I'll add that. Now let's take a look. Oh, it got up to 78%, but it's not 100, right? It's not there yet. So it's also identified after the fact that this image has low contrast. If I want to increase the score to 100%, what do I do? So I click on that, say, how do I fix this? And here's an example of where it's not a perfect tool. They haven't put the guidance in yet on how to fix low contrast or insufficient contrast images, okay? We might have to go and do some work ourselves. And I think Tricia posted in the chat a link to a contrast checker as well that we could also use. I think Gina did that as well. But in this case, I had to go and do a little bit of research about how to fix high contrast. And some of the options I found were make it a black and white with much more higher contrast. I could do that. Another thing I could have done is use Photoshop to do what's called contrast layering, and then that would fix it to give it much more high contrast between them. So you might have to do some other work. It's not going to do it for you, or sometimes it's not an easy fix. Okay, so let me go, and I did go and do a little bit of work on this. So I've got the image and I changed it into using the contrast layers. Let me go and replace the image with this high contrast. Okay, so here it's going, and look what happens. I went from 78 down to 25. I fixed the contrast issue, but if I close this, it's coming back and telling me, whoops, let me go back. Okay, let me go back in here, up to 25%. But it's lost the description again. It didn't keep the description from the original image that I put in there because I replaced it, and it probably doesn't know yet that it's the same image, just with the contrast layer fixed. So I have to go back and put it in here. So if I go back and add the alt text in here, the word welcome, written in multiple languages, like so. And if I add that here, and it takes its time to think about it, it's frozen, of course, just when I'm doing it, but I'll guarantee you it'll bump that up to 100%. But trust me on this one as I do it. Okay, let me just do that again. There it goes. It doesn't want to do it for whatever reason. It's just taking its time.
It shows us the tools are not always as well behaving as we want, but we're doing our best intentions. And I know Kevin will make sure that it looks like.
Awesome. Yes. Whoops. Try again later. So I did do this before, and it did jump it up from there. So I'll just have to trust me on that. Okay. Of course, technology, right? Okay. I'm going to stop sharing because that's all I wanted to show you there in terms of Ally and what it does. It's a great tool. It's not a perfect tool. It won't fix things for you. But what we can do now is let's go off into our breakout rooms again and just spend a couple of minutes with all of us. And I'll put you in the same rooms, and then find a course, go into your learning management system, find one of your courses, and see if you can run your accessibility report. And we can share in our rooms, what are you seeing? What is your score? How can I fix one item on that thing today so that it's a little bit more accessible for your students the next time they come in? Any questions so far before I put you into the groups? You can throw it in the chat. You can grab the microphone if you like. Okay.
All is quiet.
All is quiet. Okay, it's getting to the end of the day. So what I'll do is I'll jump you into your rooms. You'll get in there in a second. We'll only spend about 10 minutes or so. I know it's getting later in the afternoon, people getting tired. But just to see if you can run the accessibility checker, the report, and then talk to one another about what you found. Okay, so I'm going to open up the rooms now.
Looks like we're first back. I guess everybody decided to stay back there. They were having fun.
Doesn't it automatically boot you? Oh, there
Well,
we
I
go.
thought, there we go. Yeah, we were just faster leaving than everyone else. We can tell who the desperate coffee need people are. Kevin and Gina, we have one interesting situation that Monica, I think, is going to share with us.
Okay, sure.
We're involved. She was doing a check in Adobe, and we managed to get to the Adobe accessibility checker, but she has one interesting one that I wonder if you or Gina might be able to figure out what it is. So Monica, is it okay if she shares her screen now? Is it a good time now, or should we wait until a little later? Kevin, it's up to you.
No, we can certainly do that. I'm just worried. Did I get? Can I give people permission to share the screen?
I think
I believe I have access. I can.
Yeah.
Do you have access to that?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So I guess I'll just share my Adobe and
Yeah.
So we ran the accessibility checker through Adobe and I got all these little things that we were able to, for instance, if I click on here, it directs me to which image is failing. So that's fine. I can fix those. But then Sherri and I were trying to click on this title failed. And when I click it, nothing happens. And I don't know how to figure out what's failing.
Yeah,
that's a common, sorry, Gina, you go ahead.
Oh, I can tell you how to fix that.
Yep.
Okay, so the long way to fix it, which is the better way, is you go to File, Properties, and go to, see where the title is. That's what it's telling you. So you actually do technically have a title in there, but it's not descriptive. So I would put like a better title there, probably the title of your document in the main heading. Press OK. And then it doesn't automatically fix. So you have to right click on the title failed and click fix.
Ah, interesting.
Oh. Yeah. But where it can be a bit tricky is somebody can do that with nothing in the title field and it might still show it as passing. So that's why I like to tell people to do it the long way, because it might automatically just put like your file name in there, which is not what you want.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Kevin, I think we're back to you.
Oh, it's back. Okay, great. Thank you, Gina. That's awesome.
Thank you for sharing that.
And so we're back from our ally and checking, and I just wanted to open it up for anybody who has had a chance to look at their accessibility reports and see what resonated with you. What are some things that are on the agenda that you will take away and fix today? So I'll just open it up to the floor, and anybody who wants to jump in and say, this is what it found and this is what I'm going to be able to fix so that the next time my students log into my course, it'll be a little bit more accessible than it was yesterday. Don't be shy. Who was in my group there that they talked about what they were?
Hello, it's me, Janet. Hi.
Hi, Janet.
Okay, I'm going to share. My accessibility report came up at 89%, so I was happy, okay, but not happy because there were a lot of PDFs that were not accessible. So I think what I'm going to have to do is go through the PDF documents, the old photocopies that I've posted as PDFs, and have, and just make clearer copies using maybe that the app. I think somebody in our group was suggesting the Adobe PDF scanning app. I have that on my phone, so I thought, okay, that should pick up the, what was it, the OCR, I think you said, Kevin?
Yeah, the optical character recognition, some scanners have that. And what I'll do is I'll defer to Sherri and Gina, who have a lot more experience on that. Any tips for Janet?
Yeah. So you can do it two ways. Either when you scan, if you're using, let's say, a photocopier or a scanner to actually scan the document, there are often lots of OCR options on the actual machines. But if you have access to Acrobat Pro or DC, as the previous person did, you can actually do it there as well. So that if you go and I believe it's edit the PDF, then it does it automatically now. 2 years ago, it did not. 2 years ago, you had to make it do it. But now I believe if you go to edit PDF, it will automatically start trying to find the text in the document.
I'm going to throw out just one interesting thing. If you have a site license for Read Write Gold, Read Write Gold has one feature that's scan from file. So you can actually do a scan from like a file that seems to be an inaccessible PDF, and it'll actually go through and do optical character recognition and then produce a text document. So when we talk about all these kind of harder ways, or just, you know, how can I do it? It's another additional one that the students have access to Read Write Gold software as part of a site license for their college. It's another version. A lot of people don't know about it. It's kind of hiding in the features of Read Write Gold.
Okay, so sorry, if I can just ask just a quick follow-up question. So when I open up, so let's say it was a Word document, I would just open it up under the Acrobat DC or Pro version, and then do the scan, edit PDF, and then go through that scan. Is that correct?
So sorry, you're saying the original document was a Word document?
Yes.
Do you have access to that Word document?
I do, yes.
Okay, so then what I always recommend is you always go back and make your fixes in the original Word or PowerPoint document before exporting to PDF, because it's easier to check, to change the accessibility or fix the accessibility issues in those softwares than it is in Acrobat. The only time you would do it directly in Acrobat is if you don't have access to those original files, or if it's something specifically that you can't fix in Word or PowerPoint.
Okay, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
if it's a scan, sorry.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, it is a scan PDF, but I would just open it in Acrobat DC. So I'm not so great with this stuff. So
okay, sorry. So I misunderstood. So there are images in your Word document of the scanned text.
Right, right.
Okay. So are you able to, can you share your PDF document?
Oh, no. Okay.
Can we do that, Kevin? Do we have time to do
Sure,
that?
yeah. We got a couple of minutes. If it helps Janet out, by all means, let's share.
Yeah. I'm not
hearing to see we have to think outside the box when we have like an image inside of a document inside of a
I don't know if I'm going to find it now.
Right?
Hang on.
Yeah, and I'm not guaranteeing that I can solve this problem for you right now, but
my first thought was to print it off and then run it through a printer scanner and get it scanned from that. Yeah. But let's see, that might be the
that might be a way.
Yeah.
So if you're able to open the PDF and you have access to Acrobat DC or Pro, I'm as Seneca, I know Humber employees have access to it, so I would assume Seneca employees also.
We do, yeah.
Not sure about the list employees as well.
We do. We have Creative Commons for everybody.
Yes, we have it too, Gina.
Awesome. Yeah, so if you open it up in PDF, in Acrobat, and you edit it, it should recognize the text. However, it also depends on the quality of that original scan, right? We always want to try and ensure that that original scan is a high quality, high resolution. So it'll make fewer mistakes when it does that conversion.
And
no worries, Janet, if you can't find it at this stage, no pressure. We don't want to put you on the spot.
I know, but I'm just clicking furiously here. Okay, let me see. it's actually just a scanned copy, but it's a really old one. So I don't know.
We can try it, see what happens.
No, it's not this one. Okay, hang on one sec. Where did it go? Okay, here it is. Okay. Can I share? I don't know. Oh, yes, I can share. Here we go.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay, so here it is.
Okay. Yep.
It's a really old copy.
So are you able to open it in Acrobat? Maybe download it and open it in Acrobat?
Sure.
Yeah, perfect.
So this is a perfect example of where Rewrite Gold's little scanning tool would actually capture this really nicely.
Okay.
Yeah, you just, it's part of their screenshot reader, and you can actually screenshot read and take, so you draw a box around the text, and it'll go through and do OCR on it, and then pop it into a Word document or whatever else. It's not, it's a couple of steps, but depending on what you have access for. But let's see if Gina's got it this way.
So I'm not able to see your PDF document. So if you could reshare your entire desktop or the entire desktop would probably be the best, so I can see the drop down options. Yes. All right.
There we go.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Okay. Let me see. Can you click on Tools?
Okay.
Edit PDF. Oh, that looks different than what I'm used to. Try that. Let's see what happens. Maybe
nice. The nice thing about this, guys, is I think we're seeing that it takes a village to do some of this, right?
Yeah. So, okay.
So, Jan, it looks like, you've got to get your Seneca license for that, and so you'll have to get IT to get you signed up properly for so it's not a trial version that you're using.
Yes, that's what it looks like. Sorry about that, guys.
Yeah.
No problem. I'm going to see, in the meantime, I'm going to see if I can try and find one. I don't know if I have any that are scans right now, but I'll see if I can try and find one. And we can circle back if there's some time after questions.
We're kind of running up to the end. I just wanted to open up for anybody who has any questions at this stage about anything that we've talked about so far today, and go ahead and ask them, and we'll try our best to answer those.
Everyone's thinking,
or we did such a fantastic job that nobody has any questions. No, I'm just kidding.
I'll just, as people are mulling that over, I know sometimes when we go to a workshop, so we had Michelle's thing this afternoon, which I think was very inspirational. And then I'm sure you went to a workshop this morning and you've popped into our workshop this afternoon and you think, oh my gosh, I have so much to do and I'm going to go do it all. And that's where I mentioned very briefly in my little group, Thomas Tobin, who does a book on universal design for learning and post-secondary school education. He has this lovely phrase called +1. You don't fix everything. You look for one thing that you might want to add to your teacher toolkit, or you look for one thing like that's been flagged an ally, and you fix one thing, and you take it just one step at a time. Our teaching journey is a journey. It's not a leap to the mountaintop. And we just need to pace ourselves and give ourselves permission to kind of just say, well, what's one thing I could do? What's one, maybe multiple means of representation that I can add to my course content so that students are getting an option over how they can process that new information? What's one ally, a little indicator that I see that's currently sitting on an orange, and maybe I can bump it up a little bit, and it's one thing. And we're not feeling like, oh my gosh, I have to destroy and demolition my entire course, but we're just doing renovations and we're doing it just +1. What's one thing I can change? And so I really like his little +1 approach to things.
That's great advice. And I am just looking at the clock, and I'm not sure, Gina, if you have time and people want to hang around a little bit more, that maybe if you want to show it. But what I'll do for those that have to head off and have other obligations, I'll just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us today and this afternoon on our workshop. Thank you to my colleagues Sherri and Gina for sharing their expertise, and thank you for attending and sharing your accessibility stuff with us today. And so you can head on off, but if you want to stick around a little bit longer, I'll be around for a bit. And I'm not sure if Gina or Sherri might be around for a little bit, and we can just answer a couple more questions.